Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. Good evening and welcome, all of you, to the National Theatre. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Rufus Norris, director of this place, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you here for the latest instalment in the ever-enriching Genesis Conversations series, and the first one to take place here at the National. Music, of course, has always been massively important to this place and a key part of, do come in, just keep coming in if anybody needs to, a key part of what the National does. But I'm proud that over the last 8 years since I've been the director here, that we have made musical theatre a bit more of a priority here, from the classics like Follies, Threepenny Opera, to a lot more new work, Hex, Hadestown, Standing at the Sky's Edge, Mr. Gum and the Dancing Bear, and of course the huge nation-spanning Odyssey, which closed in the Olivier just over a week ago. Most of this is possible because of the help of the Genesis Foundation, and we are enormously grateful to them for the support that they've given us over the past 6 years. Our partnership currently takes the form of the Genesis Music Theatre programme. It creates funded attachments, workshops and commissions, most of them taking place up the road at the National Theatre Studio. I have personally benefited from the support of the foundation for much longer, because I believe I was the very first Genesis young director back in the days when I was young. Do you remember, John? When I worked at the Young Vic. So we are enormously grateful to John, to Harriet, and to all of the team. This conversation on British musical theatre could not be more timely for us here. Apart from all those shows we've just talked about, on Monday we start rehearsals for The Witches. Written by Lucy Kirkwood. Obviously, it's the adaptation of the Roald Dahl's classic. Book by Lucy Kirkwood. The composer is Dave Malloy. The director is Lindsay Turner. Developing this show has been a mammoth endeavour, like most big new musicals are. We've done it, that undertaking, over many years. And it's another example of what we couldn't have done without the support of the Genesis Music Theatre programme. And as I said, that goes into rehearsal on Monday, first preview on the 7th of November. Book your tickets now. In case it wasn't obvious, it's great to see John here. I'm very delighted that you're going to come and say a few words to us later. And once again, thanks to your whole team that make this happen. This whole initiative, The Witches, and this evening's event. So before I introduce the rest of the panel and get into the chat, I'm delighted to invite one of our panellists, the Olivier Award nominated Maimuna. It was going so well, Maimuna Memon, to perform the title song from her own award-winning show, Manic Street Creature, which I saw just over a year ago in Edinburgh. Absolutely fantastic, and it's coming to the Southwark Playhouse next month. And Muna is accompanied tonight by her co-star, Rachel Barnes. Thanks very much. Take it away.
Should I call the doctor? No, no. Should I call your mother? I don't know. So I'll just sit and wonder, what would you do if I wasn't here? What would you do if I disappeared? I must respect your boundaries, oh, take you for your word when you tell me no. You're smarter than so many, although you're not when it comes to a healthy mind. You don't want to stop in case you get left behind. So you just run. So you just run. Working all day, ignoring the sun, making excuses why you won't talk to no one. Manic street creature with your tormented tongue. Can I call the doctor? Why? You mustn't say that word again, it's a waste of time. They wouldn't understand even if they tried. And the drugs and the words and the CBT, well, they didn't work the first time, so I take responsibility. Run, so you just run. Working all day, ignoring the sun. You won't let me finish. You decide when we're done. Manic street creature, irresponsible tongue. Manic street creature, won't you talk to someone who would hold these reins if not me? What if I tore one day? Then who would mend me? Who would hold these reins if not me? I'm angry, oh. Who would hold these reins if not me? I'm angry. What if I tore one day? Then who would mend me? Who would hold these reins? Can I pick you up again? I'm not sure that I'm safe. So how long will I run? How long will I run? Working all day, ignoring the sun, making excuses why I won't talk to no one. Manic street creature, irresponsible tongue.
Thank you, Muna. Thank you, Rachel. And for those of you who haven't got your tickets, Manic Street Creature, Southwark Playhouse, next month. It's absolutely wonderful. Right, could we have the rest of the panel to the stage, please, where I can introduce you? So just stepping up here, Rob Hastie, Artistic Director of the Sheffield Theatres, and a man who's been responsible for numerous brilliant musical theatre productions, including Miss Saigon, She Loves Me, and Guys and Dolls, not to mention our Olivier Award-winning co-production of Standing at the Sky's Edge, and of course his current West End smash hit, Operation Mincemeat. Welcome, Rob. Thanks very much for joining us. Tali Pelman is with us, and we're delighted about that. She represents the commercial sector on our panel as Group Creative Managing Director of Stage Entertainment. She's leading the global rollout of the acclaimed hit Tina Turner the Musical. I think it's now, have you hit your 5th year yet in London?
5 years.
And 8 international productions?
Yes, about to be 9.
About to be 9. Where's next?
I'm not going to tell you. Nice try.
Oh. Tali is a board member of the Society of London Theatre, Mountain View Academy of Theatre Arts, and the Theatre Development Trust. And we're delighted that she's joining us today. The beady-eyed of you will notice that we were planning to have Dave Malloy with us. Dave Malloy, just to remind you, is the composer of many an American fantastic musical and The Witches, and he was on the way over here today to join our rehearsals, which start on Monday. But unfortunately, that journey has taken an unexpected turn. He will be with us in the next couple of days, and he's very sad not to be with us tonight. But I have no doubt with this group of people, we will have plenty to talk about. So I'm going to ask a few questions I'll start off with each member of the panel. We might have a couple. They might open out between us, and then at a certain point, I'll open it to the floor. So if you do think of anything that comes up, just park it, and you'll get a chance to ask it later. So we're going to kick off. Rob, start with you. But obviously, if others have bursting opinions, let them get a couple of sentences out. It's a big one, and is nice and general. Please do give us your view on the current state of British musical theatre. and just to give you a little bit of a guidance with that, and the role, the crucial or not role that subsidised theatre has within that.
Okay. Well, I anticipated you might ask me something like this, so I did phone round a few people saying, what do you think the state of, and some of them are in the audience tonight, so if anyone hears their opinions repeated back at them, then I'm taking full credit. Well, I've got sort of two answers really, an optimistic one and a pessimistic one. The optimistic one is that from Sheffield Theatre's perspective, which is what I feel qualified to talk about, our audiences are largely back to pre-pandemic levels, which is no small thing. And a substantial part of that recovery, when we look at what is selling, is belongs to the category of musical theatre. What we've learned, and this is mixed optimism, but what we've learned is that they are slower to return for drama. I'm specifically talking about Sheffield here, but colleagues around the country tell me that this is not unrepresentative elsewhere. They're slower to return for drama, and they are especially returning for titles or events or something recognisable. So this isn't, that's not great news for the new play. If this was a panel on new writing, new drama, I might be slightly less equivocal. But musicals people are excited by, and we could, or maybe we will later talk about the reasons why that might be, why musicals in particular might be something that people are still committed to leaving their home and spending money on.
I think let's dig into that a bit, because it is really interesting. I've just come back from Edinburgh. You can say, well, they all watched Six and they all thought that's how to do it. I don't think it's as simple as that. There are so many musicals going on in Edinburgh now. It's not a coincidence, is it, that it's coming out of the post-pandemic moment, is it?
No, I don't think it is. I mean, I was mainly talking about output, and I think we should talk about input as well. Let's talk about the amazing people who are thinking up musicals, pitching them, developing them, getting them produced, performing them, and winning awards for them. But coming at it from the audience point of view, why are audiences kind of why is that the fastest form to recover? Well, it could be that we all need a good time, and it would be massively reductive to suggest that all musicals are feel-good products, but something that makes us that lifts our spirit and gives us joy is not that possibly brackets. Cuts out a whole load of brilliant work that isn't about unalloyed joy and hope and optimism, but something that gets you feeling and gets you pumped and gets your juices flowing and gets you that you take out into the world again with you, because the power of music is that it does stay with you, and you do, even if you don't necessarily emerge humming the tunes, you emerge with your heart beating in rhythm to the thing you've just seen, and that is an experience that is really, despite some amazing musicals on film, is really not replicable on screen at home. That is definitely a live thing, isn't it? That's a thing that maybe that's why people really, really want to come back to it.
I'm just going to keep going on that thread for the moment. Tali, you're obviously dealing with the kind of box office demands and complexities that make me want to run away and hide in a corner. Would you go? Is that what's going on? Are you finding that people are really, whether that's because people want to celebrate having come out of this period of difficulty, or whether the standard is getting better, or the complexity of it, or whatever? Are you feeling optimistic about that?
Yeah, I mean, I on the one hand, I am optimistic, certainly, and I think a lot of theatres, and I think the UK is doing really well in terms of audiences returning or on the way to returning to pre-pandemic levels. I think, even as a commercial producer, I came up in the subsidized space, and I think what's difficult right now, and I think probably Dave, if he was here, would say about Broadway, for example, is that their audiences really are, by and large, seeking safety and a guaranteed night, that they know what they're coming to see. I don't think it always has to necessarily be joyful, but there is a transformative experience, a person, an event, a show, a kind of music. And I think there's a real risk in terms of the desire for that safety and guarantee, because obviously it mitigates creative risk-taking, and we're not going to evolve or develop new talent unless we have a space to take creative risk. So I think that's the danger of it, but I totally agree with you that there is a communion in receiving music live that is, especially, I mean, I used to predominantly be a play producer. I think I spent first 15 years as a producer producing plays and commissioning plays, and having, crossed over to 99% musicals for the last decade or so, the rigor of creating a musical, the extraordinary heights and emotional heights you can get to when you're hearing music, and like watching you today, hearing musicians, it is an exquisite experience. And I think post-pandemic, definitely we're looking for community experiences that bring us together, and music, does deliver that.
Great, thank you. I might come back to the question of second part of that, about the role of the subsidised theatre within it, but I'm just going to pick up on something you were saying, Tali, which is the importance of making sure that the safety in that doesn't do anything to, to lock out the risk-taking energy that it needs to, the whole genre needs to thrive in the long term. If I can move over to you, Muna, it does demand that it does need more than anything, people constantly coming through who just off and go, I'm going to do it my own way, and I'm going to do it whether anyone will let me do it or not. And I don't wish but I realise I'm painting you into some sort of whatever. I think it's probably what you did, 10 years before Manic Street Creature, but you've definitely done it yourself and made work off your own bat with your own energy. What are the benefits of that, and what are the challenges with it?
I think, starting with the benefits, I think to have kind of, creative agency feels incredibly satisfying as being both an actor and a writer. I feel that I love that I can perform someone else's work and also be able to create my own and have that balance. And there's nothing more empowering, I suppose, than getting to put on your own show and look at it and go, oh my God, I made that. I think the challenges, especially with musical theatre, and I talk about this a lot, is that musicals are 2-3 times as expensive as producing a play. And I've spent the last 5 years pitching my musical work to producers and theatres. And I do think there is, post-pandemic, a real reticence to take risks. And from my own perspective of kind of writing musical theatre that I suppose isn't conventional, I think tread the line between music industry, a musical theatre. It's not always very easy to put your finger on what that is. It's quite difficult to explain unless someone sees it. I think trying to get funding is, number one, the hardest thing, because it's just so expensive. I mean, to put it into perspective, just bringing a show to Edinburgh in its most simple form cost nearly £50,000. And I had to kind of really use every resource I could to to try and get there. And I just felt really passionate and driven to bring it to Edinburgh in 2022. We'd been in a kind of drought of live theatre for a long time. I think Edinburgh hadn't gone on properly for 3 years at that point, and I knew it was the right time, especially with the subject matter of mental health and mental health care. I felt it was the right time to bring it, and so I got a fire under my ass and just like literally wrote hundreds of emails to people to try and make it happen. But it came at the cost of being absolutely exhausted and stressed. I think the second challenge is getting programmed, and specifically getting programmed in a subsidised space, because I think a lot of the time, to speak frankly, I think subsidised theatres like to be involved from the seed of the idea. And if that isn't the case, it's very difficult to be then programmed in a subsidised space, which is kind of the best place to be put in the first instance, because they have the infrastructure to support you properly. And I think the third challenge is being paid properly. I think when you're writing something and you're producing something and you're in it, I think for me it's always like, I need to get this show on, and you know, for me personally, I'm like, well, I'll pay everyone else to make sure that they can do it. I'll pay the sound designer and I'll pay the other actors and everything. And it comes at a cost of going, okay, like I'm just going to sacrifice what I'm being paid. And I'm very happy to do that because, well, initially anyway, because I want my work to go on. But it gets to a point when you're like, when do I get paid for the work that I've created? So I think they're the three big challenges I faced.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny that you come back to the subsidised theatre as an absolutely essential step in that. So if I can come back to you, Tali, you're in a way the next step. How important do you think that interdependence between the commercial and the subsidised theatre is around the development of new musicals or the work that Maimuna is talking about?
Yeah, I think incredibly important. And I think, I mean, it's fantastic, you know, what the National has done in terms of your commitment, you know, during your time here to musical theatre, and now Birmingham Hippodrome as well as launching programs. There is work that's happening. But it's exactly what I was thinking, listening to you, in terms of how do we really join those dots? Because usually what happens with commercial producers is that they will approach, we were discussing this earlier, they'll approach a regional venue or a subsidized venue when they have something semi-cooked and they want to grow it, to birth it, to foster it in a right environment, in a protective way, which is the absolutely sensible and right creative thing to do. But either it's fully baked and we're going to the Young Vic or to wherever it may be, or to Sheffield, or to just with something complete. We might enhance it, so provide more funding, which is great for the venue to be able to mount it, because obviously the costs are much more. But that's not the true collaboration, right? So that's each party bringing a certain function to the development of shows. But I think what is, you know, the dream, in a way, the blue sky, is that something like what you do at the studio happens in collaboration with commercial producers much earlier. So something like a Williamstown in the States, you know, where you do have a true collaboration of artists and producers who are willing and able to fund work and fund talent, because we're always looking for talent, I mean, without stop looking for talent. And we need to find a place in which that talent can grow without also us putting that limiting factor of commercial work on them too early. I was having a discussion with probably one of our leading lights writers, British writers, yesterday over lunch, and we were saying, you know, when we came up, you know, I was, you know, in London at the Gate in my 20s, very broke and a very happy producer, you know, in the late 90s and early thousands. And he was a leading writer at that time. And there was so much space to take risk and develop work. And that space has to happen in a subsidized arena. Because otherwise, you know, especially writers, book music lyrics, don't have the opportunity to develop their voice. You know, what I look for when and we have I think probably 7 or 8 musicals now in development and probably another 10 in early R&D, you know, and what I'm looking for, even though we're working with talent, most of them probably haven't even worked in musical theatre. Most of our book writers are playwrights, and we're enabling them to cross over into musicals. But I need a certain maturity of voice because of the massive scale that I'm working on. It has to be international. We're international producers. I'm layering a lot of requirements onto that work. And it's not necessarily the best thing for an emerging writer to have to suddenly constrain themselves to deliver that. And so, and for some people it is, but can't be the primary channel. And so I think the question is, when you're looking at someone with enormous talent and agency, and we have at least compared to the US, a really thriving, even despite funding cuts, we have a thriving, subsidized and regional sector. How can we really join the dots with commercial producers who are not just opportunistically producing musicals, but are devoted to developing musicals, just to create a more proactive, earlier collaboration?
So
that isn't. I don't think that's happening.
No, I don't think it is either. And I guess if I'm honest, my defensive response as a subsidised producer is that. Well, it's not defensive, it's protective, actually. It's simply going, well, why would Tali come in on a new musical that we're cooking with Muna or with whatever, the ones that we've got, unless there's going to be an expectation which is going to somehow encroach on... But maybe I'm totally wrong.
I mean, I think certainly, without doubt, commercial producers have expectation because there has to be, we have to make profit and earn it back, and you're going to put that into the next show and on, right? There's no question. But I think there is space for producers who are committed to talent to find a space to help develop that talent. Because my problem is, I spent my first 10 years supporting emerging talent, and now I see fantastic people, and I can't hire them yet, most of the time. Right? Because if they're really fresh and really new, they just won't have the experience they need to develop a full-scale musical of the kind that I need to make, right? And so I need a safe space to do that work, and I would be willing to support that work for the right project. So I do think there's something we're missing, and it's that we're really, really blessed with the subsidized theaters that we have. And it's how can we provide you more wings, especially in this climate? And how can we use your protective spaces to develop the talent? I think there's a sweet spot that we haven't yet found.
Have you looked into that, Rob? Is that part of your model at all?
Specifically developing talent or developing projects?
No, developing projects with a commercial producer really early in the process.
Yes, yeah, we absolutely have.
Just musical theatre I'm talking about.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the challenge which Maimuna absolutely puts a finger on is we have fewer slots than we used to, less capacity. And this was the pessimistic bit of what I was going to say is it costs a lot more to do literally anything on stage, and something with the kind of scope and scale and imaginative requirements of a musical, just in terms of physical materials, putting a set on stage is 3, 4, 5, 6 times more expensive than it was 3 years ago. So the bigger the show, the greater the increase in costs, and our budgets have not gone up correspondingly. So that's the bit that I'm pessimistic about. And of course that does mean fewer slots, but we've always been, certainly in theatres like Sheffield, where we're very lucky in Sheffield. We have 3 spaces under our banner: the Crucible and the Playhouse, which do produce new work, and the Lyceum, which is largely a touring space. So we get quite a good sort of temperature check on the health of the rest of the industry and the touring circuit through the Lyceum. But I'm really talking about what we programme in our producing slots in the Crucible, and we with only certain slots. What's massively important to us is the most important thing to us is the audience. Okay, so what we're providing for our audience, our audience's experience, the journey we're taking our audience, the relationship we're building with our audiences, and so what we've discovered is that our audiences respond really well to stuff that feels homegrown, that feels like they can take ownership of that and the biggest stuff that's come off the Crucible stage for us in the last few years, like Standing at the Sky's Edge, like everybody's talking about Jamie, like Life of Pi, which is not a musical but kind of behaves like one, both artistically and financially, and other projects too. They have felt we've worked really, really hard, however they've been generated, to make them feel like they've come from the Crucible stage.
So just getting back to Tali's provocation, how much stuff? I guess I'm interested in how much it's our responsibility or our opportunity to give safe spaces in a kind of guided way. I mean, that's exactly what the musical theatre programme here is about, to give people expertise or to, give them opportunity to learn about different things, structure, literary right, whatever it is. How much of that do you do? Where you just go, well, we really like this artist. We don't know what they're going to cook. And right now, we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to give them some space. Before we get Tali's to get a checkbook out and, some no-holds-barred support for the next generation of Muna coming through.
Well, we didn't have the space for that, so we leased a space to do it in. We took the lease on a space across the road, which was an old bank space, so we called it the Bank, and basically operated it on sort of the model of the NT Studio, which is to say, there's tons of incredible talent in this city, and there are some really great, exciting spaces kind of growing up around the city, but we're still by far the best subsidised, biggest house in town. So we need a space that's purely about development, purely about talent, purely for artists, and we take enlightened self-interest in that. If there's something interesting that starts coming through that, we get involved with it. But it felt really important to go. There's a room, and every so often there's money, weeks or days where we can pay artists to come and just spend some time there without the expectation of what they're going to produce, and that's really important. We don't target any of that specifically at musicals. There are theatres around the country that are starting to do that. I'm quite excited by that. We should do that, and maybe we should have a talk afterwards.
I just wanted to just follow on from what Tali was saying about commercial viability, because I think it's kind of like a chicken and egg thing. Because I think if you are programmed in a subsidised venue and it does well, that can give a show more commercial viability than perhaps one might have initially suspected. I think bringing something straight to the West End is always a risk unless you have a name, unless you have, songs by a famous person, unless you have a really famous story that everybody knows, unless there's some kind of, tagline that you can hold on to. And I think more than just a safe space, I think it's imperative that new artists are given not just space to grow, but also they're given the space to put their work on. And actually, I think with the National Theatre Studio, it's incredible because I have been supported by the National Theatre Studio with Manic and just as a writer, being able to just have a space to write in, and that's been amazing. But I think there is still a disconnect between the transition from the National Theatre Studio, for example, to the actual National Theatre itself. And I think that's because there's so much work that's going on there and it's so exciting. But of course, there's only a certain amount of work that can be programmed, as with any theatre. And I think that the most important thing is that risks are taken with shows that might not be a safe bet. And I know that's much more difficult. I'm not producing a huge building like this, and I know that's much more difficult today more than ever. But I feel really strongly that, with Edinburgh costing so much money, sometimes it's just as expensive to bring. I mean, now, especially with accommodation skyrocketing, it's so expensive to bring a show to Edinburgh now anyway. But I feel like there could be a world in which, subsidised venues around the country pick a show from Edinburgh, even if there's just an Edinburgh season where they go, okay, we want to put this show on for 2 weeks. And it just gives that space for new artists to be able to show their work off to a broader range of people. But yeah, I think programming the work is the most challenging, but also most rewarding for new artists.
I think it's a fantastic point. And the last question I want to ask before we open it out to the floor, really in a way relates to that. If Dave Malloy were here, I would be asking him about the relationship between America and the UK, particularly because I think it's fair to say that the United States have respected this form for an awful lot longer than we have. And that has absolutely everything to do with why they have been so much better at us at doing it, and why, with only one or two notable exceptions, over the last 4 decades, most of the work over the river has originated from the United States, and I say that only with respect. It's really interesting spending time with, Oscar Eustace, or all those American producers who really do understand the form and take it seriously. But if you look at the model of it, out-of-town tryouts, off-Broadway, it's a different system, but we have our subsidised system here. I think they would go along with you because every show needs, if you look at Hadestown, for example, who started in off-Broadway, went to Edmonton, came here, went to Broadway. At each stage, completely changed, completely grew, but only by doing the show, I'm really just repeating back what you've said, can the show truly grow. So I'm going to open it out and don't care who answers. What do you think we've still got to learn? I mean, it was great to start with that optimism. There is a threat in there that everything becomes safe, that people don't come through, the expense that you've talked about, Muna, and the pressure for the work to be produced. What do we still have to learn from the American model?
American audience. I keep coming back to audiences. The American audience, I guess, certainly I don't know if it's true across America. The New York audience is much more excited about going to see a new musical than our audiences are. That's my guess. So that's why it's great that we bring over Next to Normal and Fun Home and Dear Evan Hansen, but those shows found success over in America.
But rather than worrying about why the audience go there, in the British context, is there anything about their processes? This is to do with taking the form seriously. Of course, you can go and study, you can do all manner of degrees in the exact nature of, Sondheim did this, or, this is the Bernstein sort of, an I Want song. You could write a PhD on an I Want song in any American. I'm exaggerating slightly. They just take the form seriously. It's a serious. But what I'm interested in is what we can take from it in their process, in the opportunities they give, or the. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think there are more spaces like Joe's Pub, for example. There's like this exciting kind of underground scene in New York, which is kind of like these little intimate spaces where people go because they know there's like someone trying out a new musical idea, and it feels like a proper scene. And like I know Adam Leson's in the audience, and Adam had that with Signal, and he still does that. And I think that's really pioneering for London, because I don't think that we quite yet have that underground scene, or that like kind of buzzing excitement for these kind of like little venues that kind of do kind of musical theatre open mic nights, so to speak. We kind of have, I think we had this like huge disparity between the workshop stage and then like the big massive kind of iteration of the musical, but we don't have the in-between of kind of like someone just trying out their show somewhere and there being an audience for that.
But that's definitely growing, though, isn't it? Places like Turbine and Southwark and Hope Mills, and there are venues that are making making their personality about.
Definitely, yeah.
Come here to see the next thing. It's in development. It's raw. It's ready. It's not ready yet, but it's going to be great.
Definitely. Yeah.
We need more of that, though.
I think we need more of it, yeah.
We can learn that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sorry, Tali. No, there you go.
But I think there's also, because we're talking a lot about artists and then producers or producing houses, and I think there's some agents in the audience I work very constructively and very, well with. But it's also about the larger ecosystem in terms of what role do musicals have for talent, and we're talking specifically about authors, book music, lyrics, and the managers and agents who take care of them, right? And what place does musical theatre have for these, guardians and gatekeepers of that talent? Because I know a struggle, again, actually not the people here tonight, naturally, because you have an interest, but, there's certainly is sometimes a resistance to musicals. It's a very, very long process. It requires enormous commitment from a writer to develop this show. I mean, 3 years is an absolute minimum. I think Standing on a Sky's Edge took...
Probably best part of 10 years.
Yeah, Tina took 4 years, and that's with the music there, right? So it's a question more of a book. And it takes a long time, and it's really hard, and chances of success are slim. And if you compare that to a pilot for Netflix or a completely blank canvas commission for an extraordinary reputable theatre, from which you will be propelled to the pilot at Netflix, where does musicals fit? And I think that's that we haven't been able to answer that question. On Broadway, I suspect, because of just the sheer economics of it, when a musical works on Broadway, there are very few of them. There's probably 7 or 8 musicals that are propelling the entire Broadway economy, while there are probably 30 shows running or 25 shows running. They can be, really meaningful for an author and for an author's future. And so I think there's something here about the full ecosystem in terms of it's exactly what you said, how do we raise, the profile of musicals and what they offer writers and what they can offer audiences. And for every musical that is a real success and can be that draw, can bring you and afford you all the plays and the commissions and all the risks you can take. So I don't think it just sits with the producers and the artists. I think there's a bigger question of how we prioritize musicals in the UK.
Yeah, I think there are connotations attached to musical theatre and what that is. And I think that, I've heard a lot of people go, I don't like musical theatre, and it's because they imagine it to be like jazz hands, like all this kind of stuff. And when people say that, I go, well, do you like music? Because I think there'll be a musical for you. And one thing that I try to do with my work is that I try to bring what you might hear on records to the stage, and I really want to try and bring a new audience to musical theatre, as a lot of people do. But that has its own place, as does Sky's Edge, as does Tina Turner. There's just something for everybody. Yeah. And I think it's also about education as well, and finding a way to get through to new audiences too.
Absolutely, and good work begets good work. So I think Hamilton was a seismic change, because it suddenly said, musicals can be different. Musicals can be for you, with you, by you, of you. And I think it just opened up, conceptions of the genre, which were probably true, and has opened up. And now, I work a lot with music artists who are not from theatre, but are from the music world, and are desperate to work on big canvases and tell narratives. And instead of one streaming single, suddenly they can tell a whole story. Creatively, that's really thrilling. So I think that we're seeing a change right now, and that is why I am really optimistic, because I know so many artists who are not in theatre even, and are really excited about what musicals can be. And Standing on Sky is a perfect example. It just breaks the boundaries of what you expect, what your experience will be, who it's for. It's the same thing you did with Dear England, right? In that I sent my 12-year-old son the next day, right? And he came back, having had the best theatrical experience he's ever had, and he sees a lot.
That's a play that's pretending to be a musical, if ever we did.
Well, good singing from the audience as well, every night. So I am really optimistic, but I think if we're serious, it takes all of us to really commit to what does that mean, and how do we see this?
And really, how do we support it from the ground up? That's what I'm really keen to open this out to the audience, because we've got so many informed people in. It would be great.
Can I say one more thing?
Go on then. One more thing, Rob. Really quickly.
Education and from the ground up. Why don't we put musicals on literature curriculums? curricula, whatever. Ken Tynan's thing about the second best play in the second best American play being Guys and Dolls, and as Hamilton has proved, and as I believe Chris's book for Sky's Edge proves, that they can be studied. Musicals in schools don't just have to be about the club for the enthusiastic kids after school. They can, brilliant though that is, and I'm sure many people have been part of that club. But
quite good to have arts on the curricula. We'll stop. But I think it's a really good point, and that really is something for us to take away. I am going to open it out because there's so many smart people in here. I saw your hand first, sir. Have we got a roaming mic or? Yeah. So now you've got to ask Muna a question. Sorry, could I just ask that when you do speak, you tell us who you are, and if you're from an organisation, do let us know what it is.
Sure. I'm Adam Lenson. I'm, I guess, a maker of musicals, director, dramaturg. I used to run a concert series called Signal, which was a kind of attempt at a Brooklyn-esque hub for new musicals, which unfortunately the venue closed down during the pandemic. But I guess I started with a question and then it lent towards an answer to the last question you had, but I'll be as quick as I can, which is, I don't understand why the conversation around musicals always has a commercial edge to it. I do understand because it's largely codified as a commercial form, but I think when you talk about play development, there are so many plays that go on every year at venues, the Bush, the Royal Court, the Almeida, all of the subsociates that have no intention or desire to ever necessarily be commercial. They're just good work that are developed for those audiences. And I think whenever we have the conversation about musicals, we're always talking about developing talent towards commercial. I think America doesn't, would be my answer to that question. If you look at Sondheim, there was no intention towards a commercial form. There was intention towards a form. If you look at America now, you look at Shana Taub, Dave Malloy, Grace McLean, all of Michael R. Jackson, all of these writers that I don't think extend any intention towards commercial with musical theatre. When we're talking about play development, I just don't think we're ever stuck in this loop of heading towards the big to make the small. And I guess my question is always, how comes we're never able to make the small? There are theatres, Ars Nova, Playwrights Horizons, Signature, Lincoln Center 3. There are so many venues that will do musicals with no extension towards the commercial whatsoever, and they will put them on. And we don't do that. And I think it's a simple answer is if we put on musicals with the intention of caring about the form, we'd have a lot more good musicals rather than constantly developing talent. I love commercial musicals. I love well-written commercial musicals, but developing talent towards the idea that they might well write a title musical with jukebox songs one day as their epitome of their artistic life makes me a little sad. I'm sure that they could, but it's a bit Franklin Shepherd and Merrily We Roll Along. It's well, let's write the show and then at some point maybe we'll do the show we want to write. And I'm firmly a Charlie Kringus about it, as you can probably tell. Anyway, that's me. Thank you for listening. I guess my question, just to not be a dick that just says, here's my no question and just a statement, is why do we never make small musicals with no intention towards the commercial?
Great question. Thank you, Adam. Look, I've got, personally, as a producer I could just take that from me. I'm interested to hear what Rob has to say about it as another producer in that case. We do. We have been cooking quite a bit of stuff in the studio. We've done 2-3 musicals in the Dorfman, which never had any intention of doing anything other than just being themselves. And I would say even with The Witches that we're putting on, for me, success of The Witches looks like a load of people coming. That's all. We're really, people can look at it and go, oh no, what the National are doing at X, Y, and Z. That really, genuinely is not the case. We're just trying to put it on. But putting on The Witches has taken almost the entire time that I've been here. If I go through all of the musicals, the new musicals we've done here, they just cost way, way more. So in defence of some of my colleagues that are the Olivia has 1,000 seats plus, we can make The Witches work if people come. If it's great in itself on that run, but if you're running a smaller house here, the plays that you're talking about might have 3 or 4 people in them, Even the smallest musical that we do here will I mean, you know this stuff. You've done it. You've done it yourself. So I think I think we are trying to do what you're saying, and I think because they're much more expensive is one of the reasons why you've got to even you've got to have conversations from the beginning about actually is it going to play. Not quite the same questions that you asked with a play itself. We've got Annie Baker coming into the Dorfman, and to any critics in the house, I hope you enjoy it. I'm sorry, I just love Annie Baker's work, and I'm going to program it as long as I'm here. I can't quite afford to do that with musicals in quite the same way. I've got to be a bit more careful about because when Annie comes, there's 5 people on stage, and that's it. But I'm mindful to share this open because it's a good provocation.
I wasn't just talking about the national, by the way. That was just...
No, and I'm being defensive, and that's why I have to get out.
We've got a really exciting 2-person musical coming on in Sheffield in the next few months, so watch this space. Although I hope for its creators that it does go on to have a further life, and I suppose that's my answer to that. Yeah, one thing is money; it just costs a load of money. So you want it, you want to project a future for it that's going to pay for the amount of money it's taken to put it on. But also, I guess from the artist's point of view, it's about the investment of time. If it's taken you 5, 6, 7, 10 years to get your show on, and I guess this is your question, why does it take so long? Why can't we just put them on in their earlier state and not worry about it? But if you've invested that much amount of time, then it's usually at personal cost. Certainly, you would hope at some point to receive, for that to kind of hit a level where all of that was worth it. And that's not just about financially worth it, but it is about reaching a bigger audience. And we're lucky in Sheffield in that the things that have been hits for us have been hits because we've only made them for us. We've got whenever we've tried to kind of manufacture a hit, it doesn't work for obvious reasons. But the things that have worked have been the things where we've gone, there's no projection further beyond this run. We're making it for our audience. We're going to make it the best thing possible for this space, for this audience at this time. And that not always, but more frequently, translates into a good piece of work that more people will want to see. Sky's Edge is absolutely a case in point. We had no idea whether London audiences would like it. Sheffield loved it. We made it the best it could be in Sheffield, and it turns out there is the universal in the specific.
Can I make a provocation? In terms of, I know the conventional musical, I know I said myself musical theatre is expensive, and it is, but the conventional musical theatre I think is very expensive. But I think there is a way in which musical theatre can be made that isn't as expensive, that can be met with how much a play in the Dorfman could do. I think I could probably... I think I could probably write a budget for that if you wanted. Sorry. I feel like we had this idea like this musical has like a massive set and a huge band and like 20 characters, but I mean I don't think that's the case. I think you can make really intimate, really special work with 5 acting musicians, and it could cost almost the same. So I would say that's my provocation.
Good one, and heard. I have 2 kids. One of them called me up a few years ago and said, some mates of mine taking a show to Edinburgh. They've written this show. You should go and see it. I was like, I'm really busy. And he said, no, it's really good. And I was like, yeah. Like I'm going to take programming advice off my son. Anyway, that was 6. And case in point, there's not many people on that stage. Our Ladies of Perpetual Succor, who didn't love that? That was fantastic. And again, an Edinburgh find. Next question, please. Who are you here? I'm going to give you my mic.
I'd like to preface this by saying here's an agent who thinks she has all the answers, so apologies. It was really interesting for me to hear Edinburgh come up. I produced shows in Edinburgh for 20 years and didn't for the first time this year because the costs have become so prohibitive. And for me, in terms of bridging the gap, we're in a situation where producers or theatres have offered an amount of money for a show to be written, and then it's what I call desk commissioning. So they go, we love the idea of this, here's X number of £1,000, please go away and write it. And then you spend 3 years waiting to find out whether or not it's ever going to see a stage. Now, there was a time where we could say, well, let's just take it to Edinburgh and hope that Rufus, Norris's son, recommends that he goes to see it. However, in my first experience, that's never been the case. And so I think in terms of, on a serious note, in terms of bridging the gap, what would be really nice was, instead of the amount of desk commissioning that goes on, would be to go, okay, realistically, here's what it costs to write it, let's pay everyone properly. Instead of putting the onus on the artist to spend £50,000 taking that show to Edinburgh, why are we not factoring that into the cost in the first place and saying, okay, fine, here's the money to write it, here's the money to create it, here's the money to send it to Edinburgh, and then if it's a success, then it has a future. Why is that middle ground onus always on the artist?
Well, it's making it's. I mean, in a way, it's what we we're saying, earlier, blue sky, and as it may sound, but it's joining those dots, right? And I think Joe's Pub is something. I went to university in New York and spent many evenings there, and there is Edinburgh is our version of that, right? In a way that it's a can-do space, or was a can-do space. So I think it's a really, really good point. The question is, how do you put people together, right? How do you put certain tastes, what I'm looking for may be different from what you look for, right? It is personal, it is taste, it is aesthetic. How do you make those marriages? And, I know who I call. I call the agents I work with to help me make those marriages if I don't know who the person is who can deliver a vision that I have for something. So I think it's a really, really good point, and I think bridging that gap is the right term, right? Is the right term, because you have the work you want to do, I have the work I want to do, and how do we connect? Because if you said to me, well, I want to do this, and I can show you that I can work on the scale, and I can write for character, and I'm deep in structure, and I can create high character arcs that can earn the song, all the things that I look for and are very hard to find, no matter how experienced a writer you have in the room. If you support me for X, then, and I love your work and your demo, that is something I would take seriously, right? But who's going to put us together? So I think that's really interesting.
Thank you. I think we've got probably time just for one more. Yes, sir, pointed to you.
I'll just speak. It's fine. I don't mind. So I guess it's more of an invitation, really, than anything else. I'm Chris from Birmingham Hippodrome, and I'm really excited to be in this room and to hear everything this evening. As a lot of you will know, we have announced that we will be running a new musical theatre department. A lot of the things that you're calling for tonight are things that we're keen to see move forward. Absolutely everything is going to be in partnership. And I think we know that with production anyway, that a lot of things get off the ground in partnership. What we're able to bring is some of that from the outset. We are commissioning with the intention to production. So that sense, there's a bit of meeting where the artists are coming from in that sense, but there is that sense of us all needing to do it together and looking at how we bridge those gaps. So I think those things around, and one of the anchors, this isn't an advert, this is a come talk to me whenever you want to, okay? And we will really want to hear from everybody and all their different lenses in this room to try and build something that is for the sector, that is for the nation together. It's not all about the Hippodrome, and I think that's the really important thing, that it's how we build it together to find the right place for people. And one of the things is absolutely about craft and is absolutely about taking the form seriously. And I think it is about us recognising and sometimes putting on, while there is a sense of taste and while there are those certain things, being willing to find that centre ground of where various of us are willing to jump in and back the same horse to give it a chance of success. And so it's that invitation and clarification that it's about collaboration, really. And wherever we are on the lenses of this, in our different spaces, it would be really great to talk to people. But it is about bridging gaps, forming links, collaboration, and making things possible. That's what it's about.
I think that's fantastic. And I am going to bring the debate to a close, but I just want to completely agree with you and underline that. I think lots of things have come out of COVID, and while we inevitably look towards the financial, the difficult, the cost of living crisis, fuel rise, etc., etc., etc. It's very easy to be negative about it. But what happened in our industry was actually a massive increase in collaboration, just in getting together to advocate. The government said to us, "You've got to speak in one voice," and I was one of hundreds of people saying, "You don't know what you're talking about. It's commercial, it's subsidised, it's nationwide, it's not for profit, it's all sorts of stuff." And they said, "No, shut up, one voice," and that's what we did. And it's benefited some places more than others, but it really taught what it means to come together. I gave a keynote at a climate conference in Australia this morning, such as the beauties of Zoom. And as we look at that whole revolution of what's happening, it can only happen in collaboration. So thank you for that. I think that's, in a way, our takeaway from this is to work together, to listen to the artists that are coming up, and to the people who've given them the opportunity, as well as been among them, and to look at what our responsibility is and what the opportunities are and how we can lessen the load for each other. Thank you very much, everybody. I wish we could talk for much longer, but we can't. We're going to finish in a moment with Muna taking the mic again, But before we do that, I just would like to invite the person to the stage whose fault this all is. John Straczynski is created the Genesis Foundation and everything that's sprung from it, and I'd love to invite him to come and say a few words. Thank you, John.
I'm not going to speak from the stage. I'll speak from here. Several years ago, I had a lot of Chinese people say to me, "Why is the American technology sector so successful?" And I said, well, actually, they've had Palo Alto, they've had venture capitalists, they've had Stanford, and they've had Caltech now going for almost 100 years. And I listened to this discussion today, and it was only in this discussion tonight that it dawned on me, because I was blessed to grow up with people like Leonard Bernstein, and I was blessed to go to the rehearsals of West Side Story when he was just rehearsing it, and I was about this high, and I was running around doing all sorts of... But let's remember, the English culture is a culture of the spoken word. The American culture is a culture of the visual image. And remember, the film industry in America, there was an enormous industry. Remember, Birth of a Nation, 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. You had the jazz singer, and you had these big studios that employed thousands of people. And I'll never forget, Uncle Lenny would always say, when they had the wrong people in West Side Story, he wouldn't say, call this person or call this person. It would be, call this agent at this studio. I know there's this person. So you had, if you will, in America in the first half of the 20th century, an enormous body of work of people coming out of the film industry. Many of those films were musicals. And then, of course, the second thing you had is you had a whole body of people, and you understand this, in New York, who actually are investors in the theater. And they are family generations of people who are, they always provide a certain amount of money. They see the first shows as they come up, and granted, only one out of 25 or 1 out of 50 shows goes anywhere, but they're writing checks for $50,000, $100,000, and there's a big network of people who, even today, still do this. So this, I'm not saying but we're behind that curve by maybe a couple of decades, at least, or maybe 50 years, because that's something that's been well developed. And when you look at musical theater in America, and it's not just Rodgers and Hammersteins and George Gershwin and all these, but that's been going for a long time, and drawing talent from the music industry, drawing talent from across America and other things, and pulling it into musical theater where it was appropriate. So I think that's one of the things that we take for granted. And there's also been a body of people who are prepared to invest in commercial theater. Not subsidized theater, but commercial theater. So that was just a little My constructive comment, first of all, thank you for this evening. I was impressed. I mean, I'm very focused in the work we do in Genesis on role models. I think role models are important. We're very, very focused on taking creative risk, taking risk in safe spaces. And I guess the question I wanted to ask, really the three of you, was, I was particularly struck, and I have to figure out how to solve this problem, this whole point between when you have a musical and you have what I call emerging talent, because this is something Genesis is really focused on. When you have an emerging talent, but that point where you say, okay, that person needs another 5 or 10 years because they're not ready to write cabaret. They're just not going to, they're not Fred Ebb. They're not going to write cabaret. What happens? Who holds those people's hands? Who mentors them? Who nurtures them? What's the risk that I'm terrified that talent falls out of the system. They give up and go and get a job, doing something totally unrelated. They just, I'm not saying education is bad, but they may become a school teacher and give up. But what can we do to create a network, some sort of framework, so that these people can support each other, nurture each other, and be given some forum for being offered opportunities, or is there a group of people that people can belong to and know something? I mean, what is the network to make sure that this talent pool doesn't disappear?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what all of us, in a way, have been saying, and I do have to say, I mean, my first job was at the Gay Theatre and supported our designers. So what you've been doing for literally decades, supporting emerging artists, is extraordinary. But I think it's what we learned in the pandemic, right? That our own agendas, our own concerns, our own worries take a second seat to a bigger mission, right? And who gets the hit show and who gets that significant artist to commit, who gets X writer to come on board, right, their project. If there's a hub that we can create, again, I mentioned Williamstown, there's one effective space in the US that has challenges but has done this, then I think something could be done that is that contributes to all of our buildings and to our networks and to our artists. And I think we should have drinks after the show.
Okay, thanks, John, for that provocation. And there does seem to be some sort of theme and hopefully idea forming here, which is, of course, exactly what these events are about. So thank you very much for everybody for contributing to that. We cannot end with the spoken word. I don't know, this is a real cliche, but I can't resist it. If I might summarize, I'm just going to thank you all. Thank you, Tali. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Muna, for joining us. I want to say a huge thank you to Mark Trishler here, who Mark does many things here at the National, but not the least of which is to run this programme and also to stand in at the last minute for pianists who are going to be on the panel. And he will be, in fact, taken to the piano in a moment to show off his tinkling skills. So thank you, Mark. But if I had to summarise in a totally cliched way what Muna has perhaps given voice to today, it is open up your door. So we're going to finish, of course, with that fantastic song from the show that Rob directed that we all look forward to seeing again at the beginning of next year. Here's Maimuna Memon. Thank you very much.
It's very long, Mike. Yeah, good. I'm taking this off.
Open up your door. I can't see your face no more. Love is so hard to find, and even harder to define. Oh, open up your door, 'cause we've time to give, and I'm feeling it so much more. Open up your door. Open up your door. Open up your door. I can't hear your voice no more. I just want to make you smile, and maybe stay with you a while. Oh, open up your door, 'cause we've time to give, and my feelings aren't so obscure. Open up your door. Open up your door. Oh, open up your door, 'cause we've time to give, and I'm feeling it so much more. Open up your door. Open up your door. Love is so hard to find, and even harder to define. Open up your door, and I've never felt so sure. Oh, open up your door. Open up your door.